Is Max Verstappen going to be offered $1 billion to become an Aston Martin driver? In this video, we're going to break down all the reasons that he might be going to the Silverstone-based team in 2026. Let's get started. Before we get into it, just remember to like, subscribe, and follow at the Pitwall Pod. 2025 is going to be a big year for us here at the Pitwall, and we would love your support. And the best way you can do that is subscribe right here on YouTube. All right, let's get into it. On January 16th, the Daily Mail reported that Aston Martin is targeting Max Verstappen in a $1 billion deal for Red Bull's four-time world champion to turn Formula One on its head after signing up to a $20 million a year deal for designer Adrian Newey. So we all followed this last year. Adrian Newey announces that he's leaving Red Bull. The key designer that just built the most unstoppable F1 car of all time in 2023 is leaving the Red Bull for unknown reasons, and he is really focusing on the 2026 regulations, which we could go into a whole debate about engine versus aero regulations and whether or not he's going to have that big of an impact. But I think we can all agree that from the time 2023 started to the time 2023 ended, Aston Martin took a steep nosedive that continued into the 2024 season. And I think we all can agree that it will continue in the 2025 season until Adrian Newey has some impact to help this team stop making terrible upgrades. Every time they bring an upgrade, it's terrible. Is that really enough to lure Max Verstappen away? Well, it might be. So let's get into the details of what they're actually saying is going to happen. So they're saying that Aston Martin have been telling their sponsors that Verstappen will join them if they're able to muster up this $1 billion. Now, this isn't going to be $1 billion a year. The contract itself will be worth $1 billion. And right now we know he makes, $50-ish million. And we know that Lewis just signed a $100 million deal. So, how much is this going to take? How are these sponsors looking? We know they already have two drivers, Stroll and Alonso. And, you can call Stroll a driver if you want to, but you got to be expecting that they think that Fernando Alonso is going to retire in 2025, which is huge that he's going to retire this year. So that would leave a seat open for Max. Basically, they've been telling their sponsors, and when I say they, I mean one of their key personnel that helps sell sponsors, who is named Jefferson Slack. He's making this pitch to all the sponsors that give us this money and we'll get Max Verstappen. And there's the big debate about whether or not this article's true, whether or not this is just a hit piece, whatever. Let's talk about the likeliness of this scenario actually happening, and then the reports about whether or not it's actually true or not. So why would Max Verstappen go to Aston Martin in 2026? Well, we first were thinking that Max might be interested in going to Mercedes as early as this season, 2025. And there were all these rumors all of the 2024 season, as soon as Lewis announced that he was going to Ferrari, of, hey, Max might be interested in Mercedes because he thinks that in 2026 that the Mercedes engine is going to be the best power unit, and McLaren doesn't have a seat available, and he doesn't want to drive for Williams, obviously, and Alpine didn't know that they were going to use the Mercedes at a time. But would Max really go to Alpine? No. So the only two logical places would be Aston Martin and Mercedes that have the team to back him and the money to pay him. But Aston Martin announced that they're getting Honda engines, so they are no longer going to have the Mercedes engines in 2026. Max has had great success with Honda engines. He's won all of his championships with it. Previously to that, Red Bull had tons of mechanical DNFs that almost caused them to lose Max over it. You got to be thinking, Max sees Adrian Newey go, then he knows the Honda's there. It's something to consider, and he has no real competition as a teammate because, again, Lance Stroll. But Max has to think about his future. He has a kid on the way. He's got to decide whether or not, is he going to stay at Red Bull throughout his contract and then retire? Is he going to go longer at Red Bull? Is he going to try and take his career a different direction? Who knows? The last question you would ask yourself is, why would he leave Red Bull? Well, Red Bull obviously did not win the Constructors' Championship, in a large part due to the fact that Checo did not compete well enough to earn enough points to get them high enough. But other teams are making improvements, and Red Bull is now reporting that they are having correlation issues in their wind tunnel, which is basically the cause of everybody else's pain, but they seemingly have figured it out, or at least some of them have. So if Red Bull now thinks they have correlation problems, and if that's actually true, they'll actually likely continue to slide back or at least their ultimate pace will. But the fact of the matter is, there were times during the 2024 F1 season where Red Bull had the fastest car, and there are times in the 2024 F1 season where Red Bull had the fourth fastest car. And that has to be very worrying for somebody like Max Verstappen. Whether or not this article's true, I don't really think matters, because it's so clear that Max has been considering a move for quite a while. And on that note, there was a Sports Illustrated article that came out on the next day saying that Aston Martin clarifies that they've never been talking to him and all this stuff. But isn't that what they would say? The PR is, hey, we're not trying to take Max. We're happy with our drivers, all this stuff, because they want to tell it in a way that they want to tell it. It's kind of like how Ferrari had to drop an early post about Lewis that they weren't expecting. Clearly, they would have had some crazy graphic ready and all this stuff, but they had no time to get ready. Lewis signed on the dotted line. It leaked, it was out. He told Mercedes that was the end of it. It's a very similar situation here. If Max really is flirting with other teams, it's going to leak. Overall, I would take this with a massive grain of salt that obviously there are more reputable sources saying that this is not true. There are other rumor mill people that are saying it is true, and we won't know until we see what Max does. If you're a Red Bull fan out there, if you're a Max Verstappen fan, and you're a fan of the sport, I would just tell you, be prepared. Anything could happen. I could see Max going to a different team in 2026. I could see him retiring in 2026 and much more. So every race that you watch Max, just enjoy watching him if you're a fan, and count your days if you're not a fan until he's not on the grid anymore, like some of us do. I'm kidding. I'm not that much of a Max hater. I just want Lewis to always beat him. Anyway, that's about it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Like I said, please subscribe, like, and follow at the Pitwall Pod. Follow us on Instagram as well at the Pitwall Pod, all that good stuff. And I'll see you on the next one.